Yeah,
for sure.
Since we're at Industry Vibe, and we're about to end this, I would love to know your thoughts on where we are at right now, as the Kenyan gospel music industry. That's what this conversation has been predominantly about. And as somebody who, you're as much as you're giving props to the Kevs and the Kanjiis and I think you're that person, and that's why you're on the Playhouse. You can talk about being at Barclays. People have no idea. There's a generation that was not even born then, and all the way up until you have been involved in Bahati. Bahati's gig.
I never thought about that, by the way.
You get what I mean? You have seen artists like me come and go. And you're not just there. You're there.
So you're gone, eh?
Yeah, I'm gone. I'm behind the camera. But
your eyes.
But
that's my jam.
I closed them too long. Snoozed. So why, by the way, you actually have done a whole lot for this industry, and I'm extremely grateful for that. I think you've touched, and you've not just touched with your hands, you've touched with your heart. That's good. But anyway,
you come to this side.
and just recorded myself. So what's your take on where the industry is? Where do we need, where is it?
Okay.
Real talk, not
you don't want PR, right?
Yeah, I don't want PR. I don't want to in front of a camera.
Okay. I have to rethink my answer then.
Yeah.
I'll be honest and say we are at I call it in business they call these things critical inflection point. A critical inflection point is a point where you reach and you're like, I must make a decision. It's decision point for am I going to go right or am I going to go left? I want to be completely honest and give you my admission, and part of it is my confession as well. I told you from my days in Mofrika, for me, I always wanted to build the industry. If you ask a George Law, those guys, I used to tell them, we never write negative stories. We want to build. If the gig had 2 people, make it sound like it had 2,000 people. Build. And that's always
and not lie.
And not
build.
lie.
I
not
get,
lie.
yes.
Yeah, not lie. So there are gigs we'd go to when I was doing Mofrika and we just say, we can't cover this one. Because I don't know how to spin it positively. And the blogs now would love those ones because they'd be like, this guy's gig flopped. Yeah. Just like, that's not my narrative. When I joined Groove, and I served on, and I'm not on the Groove team anymore, but when I served on Groove for 2 years, one of the things I was passionate about is care. Care for artists, discipleship, mentoring of artists. So we started prayer days, we started, those types of forums. And I really felt that my heart was always for let's build, let's keep going. The gospel music industry has made a terrible mistake. And I admit it as someone who has been a part of it and has driven certain sections of it. And, I've spoken glowingly about the industry for years. I've reached a place where I'm beginning to ask myself, should I have been a bit more circumspect in my thinking about this industry? The challenge with this industry is that we've celebrated the gift that people have. But that's all. And that we haven't held people to any sort of account or any sort of standard. And, I was talking with a friend of mine the other day, and he was saying to me, Kuria, how many gospel artists do you know who have had a wedding? And we sat and we counted. And I grieved. Richie, my spirit grieved. Because I just felt we made a mistake somewhere. I can tell you the number of gospel artists who are married, who are flaunting their pictures of pregnancy and kids on Instagram, but nobody has called them to account. And you see, gospel music, it says something. It says we are people of faith. We are people of standards. We are people of, I don't know, we are called for a higher purpose. That's part of it. And, I don't want to say that every gospel musician must be a pastor, or that's not what I'm saying at all. But I am saying that even in society's eyes, you represent something. But we haven't called people to account the thing that they represent. You know, in leadership, Richie, they say, you always get the behavior that you reward or tolerate. You have kids, you know. With your kids, if you tolerate behavior, they just continue. If you reward it, it just continues. And I think we've rewarded and tolerated behavior that has not met the standards that I think even society, forget even Jesus and church, that even society has of us. And we haven't called people out on their crap. We really haven't. And as a result, what happens is that people come through and there's no one to call, you know, I've reached the top and no one is calling me out and I'm doing this. And I just keep doing it, you know. A couple of things I think have happened with this industry that have really changed through maybe the past 10, 15 years. One of the things that has happened with this industry is that the fathers of the industry are not involved in the same way as musicians. Let me ask you a question. Nameless. Who is his contemporary in gospel? Red Sun, Juakali and Nonini, who are their contemporaries? What's happened with us is our pipeline has grown by a lot of people who would have been the fathers, dropped out of this. They may still be in the industry in different capacities, but you see, Nameless is still culturally relevant as a musician, not as a businessman. So what has happened in gospel music is we've had a complete lack of fathers in the industry who are culturally and musically relevant, who will say, my guy, that's rubbish, who will call you out. And what's happened is a vacuum has been created.
I get it. And
this, you know what they say about nature and vacuums? Nature abhors a vacuum. It must be filled. And some young guys have come into this vacuum and they're just like, okay, no one is telling me anything. I'm still getting spins. I'm still winning awards. And no one has called them out. A second thing that happened in this industry, you see, when I started off with the industry, you required your church.
I remember for Groove Awards, I had to go and get Mavuno to sign that I am a member of this church.
Absolutely.
And
Richie, I'm even talking about further back. Further back, I knew Danko. You know Danko?
Yes.
And Wanono family.
Yes.
I knew which church they went to.
Buru. I can even tell you.
Yeah, exactly. I knew which church they went to. You know what I mean? Kinangashville and Kinashem and all those guys.
Yep.
And we grew up in the church system. What that meant for us is that we had accountability and a sense of discipleship and mentorship from that space. Now, with the explosion of mainstream media and social media, I've not required that. You see, I can become a YouTube sensation.
Yep.
It means I don't need my church, I don't need my pastor, I don't need any of that. In the past, ask Peter Dera, he required Bapo to prop him up. Rap community required GT to prop them up. If GT said we are kicking you out, they'd have killed their career. You know, the guys who were, I think it was Zaidi Mziki, who were affiliated with FEM at one point.
FEM actually paid for their whole album.
Paid for the whole record.
Yeah,
you know
$1 million.
I mean? So those are some of the things that have plagued us. And then just because there's nobody, let me give you a good illustration. Winter Olympics when I was in Australia are terrible at Winter Olympics because they don't really have snow and whatnot.
Yes.
So they suck. But they always send guys. You know, Kenya can send a guy to Winter Olympics, just chocha.
Yeah.
Just go. Jaribu nani. Jaribu, you're good. Yeah. So Australia sent a guy called Stephen Bradbury. He became an urban legend in Australia for what's it called? Skiing, the race.
Yeah.
I don't know, the skating, whatever it's called. So this guy is there. He's the finals. He's dead last. And then on the final lap, one guy trips. What happens when one guy trips? Like dominoes, they all fall. And Stephen Bradbury passes the finishing line like this.
I'm so confused.
Are we disqualified? Or have we won and he's not sure that he should celebrate or not? Will they call us back to race again? And that's what has happened in gospel music.
That's sad. Okay.
What's happened is the fathers are not there. And there are young boys and young girls now who are setting the pace. And they're passing the finish line and nobody's telling them anything. And they're like, I've won the medal. Allah, look at how I've lived my life. And the reality now, let me tell you, Richie, and for me, it pains me to reach this place in where I am. Our industry is rotten. It's not broken. It's rotten. It's rotten. We have heard a couple of stories, and people have made their fun and created their memes and whatnot. Oh man, if someone dug deeper and called people out on their BS, we'd be in terrible trouble. And let me tell you, Richie, for me, who has got this love for the industry, but a pastoral heart as well, I've always felt, man, I don't want the industry to self-destruct. Some people must prop it up. Some people must show this is the good side of the industry. But I have reached the place where I realize, if this industry self-destructs, I don't know if it's a bad thing. That's a very painful thing for someone like myself to say. I don't know if it's a bad thing. If it means us building again from scratch and figuring out what's the connection with the church. What's the connection between the industry and the church? Right now we are like this, we are separate completely. Where are the fathers and the mothers who will call people out and say, no, you're wrong? I don't mean call you out publicly on Facebook or whatnot, but who will call you and say, I can't endorse what you're doing. Where are the platforms that are going to say, listen, we're not going to play your music? Where are the platforms that are going to say, even for our platform, that will say, we're not going to give you an award. This is not what we signed up for. And I really feel gospel music now is at a place of decision. It's at a place of what should we do next. It's at a place of, are we going to have genuine remorse about stuff that we've done and gone wrong? Are we going to have, for me, my call to artists would be, guys, you didn't get married. Do it. Do it publicly. Right now there are artists, you'll see someone propose to someone, but you've been living together for how long? But nobody calls you out. Nobody says anything about that. You know what I mean? If I, off camera, I can tell you the stories, but there are stories and it breaks my heart. When we go for prayer days and we call the pastor and say, pray for people. And the stories you hear. I remember one time I went for Groove Camp and I felt like I needed counseling after that. I just thought, my God, what's going on here? And I'm not trying to out the industry. I'm not trying to, because me, my heart, you know me, Richie. You know me. My heart is for this industry. And my desire is that God will do something amazing in this industry. But I realize the trajectory we're on is not a good one. And we're going to self-destruct. We're going to self-destruct unless someone says, guys, it's time for repentance. It's time to change our ways. When you see gospel artists calling each other out in public on social media, fighting, and it brings our name into disrepute. Some of the songs, some of the content that people have ridiculed and their memes and whatnot, no one says, man, I'm never going to produce a song like this. I remember RK. Let me tell you a story. RK told us this story of an artist. I don't want to mention his name. RK was a producer at Homeboys. And it was years and years ago. And, this artist was brought into studio, record this guy, and he started rapping. And RK said, "Z, get out of the booth." RK was not even running his own thing then, he was an employee. The Wadosis came in and they were like, "Excuse me, this guy has paid good money, record." RK sat down that artist. Actually, maybe I should say it was Circuit. And he sat down Circuit and he told Circuit, "Do you have kids? Do you want your kids to listen to this filth? Then me, I don't want my kids to listen to the filth and say, you're the one who produced this thing." And he told Kinaraba, "It doesn't matter what you do. I will not produce this dude and his music." And Circuit actually had to go and change his lyrics. That's what this industry is lacking. People who will say, listen, this foolishness of fighting on social media, it's foolish. You're believers. Scripture prescribes for you how you go about solving conflicts. You don't go on social media. People will say, "Ati, what? You're living with who? What's going on in your personal and your sexual life?" We don't work together. Clean up your act until the day that we work together. And until someone is brave enough to call out this industry and say to guys, this rottenness that we see, this rot that we see, clean it up. Am I saying the entire thing is broken? I don't think so. I think when I look at your Alice Kimanzi's.
It's so funny, I was going to say that.
I look at people, I see a redemptive side of it. I see people who have a real heart for this thing. I look at a Mr. T. I think he's very, I mean, I have my comments about him. But the people who I look at and I just say, there's so much redemptive stuff. Masi Masika, for instance, or Eunice Njeri.
Riga on the pop side. Noel Dorito on the pop side.
Absolutely. Webby. But I think about the pop guys, even the pop guys, the people I look at and I'm like, there's a redemptive thing with Guardian Angel that I like.
Yes.
That I like about him. And I'm like, I want to see that nurtured. But there's a side of this thing that's broken and that's going to collapse. Unless someone does what RK did for Circuit and says, this is nonsense. We're not taking this rubbish anymore. If you don't hold people to a higher standard, they create their own standard. And that's, it pains me, Richie, to say these things because I've been, in my opinion, the biggest defender of the industry. But let me say this unequivocally. One, DJs, you need to clean up your act. You need to stop playing people who you know have issues. You need to clean up your act. Radio stations need to clean up their act as well. Radio, television, all of that need to clean up our act. I think our awards platforms as well, we also need to be very, very wise about who you put on and who you don't put on. I think we've reached that place where you must say, guys, who are the gatekeepers? Producers. Producers must say, I listened to some producers. I listened to, I think it was Saint P, who's like, I'm not producing this. We must get to the place, and I'll say it, one of the, big name gospel artists who released his song a couple of years ago.
A diss track to The Groove.
Yeah. A couple of producers told him, Z, we're not producing this song.
Yeah.
And we need producers to get back to the place where they say, we're not doing it. And unless the gatekeepers, and churches as well, churches need to stop calling people for missions. We need to stop using people for their giftings. You know what I mean? We need to say, listen, where is the, we need to say, okay, I want you to come, but I need to know who your pastor is. And I want him to say, if you called up a Pitson to your gig, his pastor will vouch for him. His pastor will vouch for him. And I think the whole ecosystem needs controls.
Yes.
That says, we're not doing this. I'm not putting you on any platform, whether it's I'm producing your music video, your audio, your music video, I'm playing your song on the radio as a DJ anywhere, I'm giving you an award, I'm calling you to perform at my church. If we don't call for standards, we're in trouble.
Korea, and you've spoken back and my heart is pounding. First of all, let me say you're right. That's part of the reason as to why I started the Playhouse. Just because I realized that the fathers have not told their stories. You get? Or their stories are not reaching as many people as it should be. Because some have told their stories. I mean, I'm a product of Kanjii, but maybe not that many people have got it. My last thing for you is, I now know that you're no longer at Groove in terms of staff. So what are you doing now? What's this 2019 thing?
So I left Groove at the end of last year, beginning of this year. And not on any bad terms or anything like that, but just a new season. And for me, what I feel, and I talked about it earlier, is this whole thing about the church and its narrative. And the church being unable to tell its narrative, and unable to use music, media, the arts, communication, and all these things to be able to tell its narrative. And you were there when I made this presentation. I always have this presentation when I talk about, people talk very ill of the church in Kenya. People talk about, and on the Playhouse the other day I heard about, someone who said he's been hurt significantly by the church. I wish he told his story of how he's been helped, but that's another story for another day, how he's been helped and healed by the church as well. But the church just has this really, really bad rep in society. And the big problem is that because the church doesn't know how to tell its story. Our story has become the story of Kanyari and Prophet Owor. When people think church, that's what comes to mind. But I can tell you, someone who's worked in churches, for every Kanyari there are 30 good pastors who every week are teaching teens how to be responsible and godly people, who are raising up kids in godliness. Every week there are people who are talking people off the ledge of suicide and depression, without a doubt. People who are talking into marriages that are crumbling every week. I know because I've been in that space. But who tells their story? When we don't tell our story is told for us. And people who are hurt, who are bleeding, and who have a vendetta are the ones who will tell the story and say, that's what the church is like. And I always tell the story to Chi of how it's amazing in Kenya when you think about the church's impact on this nation. I always talk about education. You know, the Catholic Church alone runs 1 out of every 3 education facilities in Kenya. How crazy is that?
That's insane.
This is a Catholic Church alone.
That's one church. That's the Catholic Church, yes.
If you add all the churches together, your percentages maybe go up to maybe 40%, which means there's every likelihood that the church is matching the government almost shilling for shilling in education in this country. Health is another crazy one. Health, as of, I think it was 2 years ago, the stats were that 49% of health institutions in this country are run by churches and church organizations. That's madness.
That's madness.
That's 50%. You're saying for every shilling the government, with all its tax and all its KRA stuff put on the table, the church puts a shilling. That's ridiculous. But who tells this story and who captures this story? And for me, even from my days of Mofik, it was always, yes, there's rubbish going on, but man, I must tell the stories that are good. And for me, I'm in a season of life now where I recently began a church communications agency that's a faith-based agency that helps churches and Christian organizations just with their communications. How do you create communication strategy? How do you use the things you guys preach about, digital? How do you use that? How do you use video? How do you use publications? How do you use all these things and create coherent, strong communication strategy that will be of benefit to the church? The church must shine bright. That's what I always say. The thing is called 1,000 watts. And I always say the church must shine bright. We must help the church live at 1,000 watts. Shine bright, tell their stories of this actually is what we are doing. I don't feel that the church is doing enough of that. And God willing, with the strength that I have in the years that I have left, that's what I want to do with my life.